Imagine your child is outside on a peaceful Saturday morning, drawing dinosaurs with sidewalk chalk. Now imagine two men in fake HOA vests roll up in an unmarked SUV, confront him like he's a criminal, and within seconds, he's on the ground, unconscious, his bones broken. That's not fiction, that happened. Right in front of me, right in front of his mother. What followed shook our neighborhood to its core, exposed a terrifying nationwide scam, and led to one of the most public takedowns of abuse hiding behind fake power. You're going to want to hear every part of this story, because what happened to my son could happen in any neighborhood, to any family. If you think HOA drama ends at parking tickets and fence height arguments, think again. Stay with me. The truth is just getting started, and so is the justice. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. We lived in a quiet cul-de-sac, friendly neighbors, trimmed lawns, backyard grills, and the occasional passive-aggressive flyer about garbage cans left out too long. That Saturday morning, my wife was in the backyard cooking, and I was watching Jesse, our 7-year-old, chalking out an epic dinosaur mural on the sidewalk. He loved T-Rexes. The kid would talk your ear off about how they weren't just hunters, but protectors. It was innocent, beautiful, and it was the last peaceful moment we'd have for a long time. Out of nowhere, a black SUV pulled up. No plates. Windows tinted darker than midnight. Two men stepped out, khaki vests stamped with bold white letters. HOA. Except I'd never seen them before, and I'd been to every HOA meeting for the last 6 years. They moved with a confidence that didn't match the clipboard crowd. These guys weren't here to talk about shrub height. One of them pointed at Jesse, the other pulled out a tablet and muttered about a violation. Then, just like that, without warning, they shoved him. No warning, no hesitation. My boy hit the pavement hard, and for a moment, time froze. I heard the thud, then the silence. Jesse didn't scream, didn't cry, just collapsed like his strings were cut. My wife dropped everything and ran, barefoot. I sprinted, but it felt like the yard had tripled in size. When I reached him, his little body was twisted, blood pooling near his head, arm bent wrong, leg visibly broken. I scooped him up, felt his shallow breath. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I shouted for someone to call 911. The men, they didn't run. One of them looked me in the eye and said, "Non-compliance has consequences." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then came the distant wail of sirens. Multiple SUVs screeched into the neighborhood from both ends of the street. Flashing lights, real uniforms, real authority. In seconds, SWAT officers surrounded the scene, guns drawn, orders shouted. The two men were on the ground, cuffed, restrained, arrested. Just like that, the illusion broke. They weren't HOA. They weren't anything. They were predators hiding behind fake badges. The ambulance raced off. We weren't allowed to ride with Jesse. Protocol, they said. Too many people. So we followed in silence. Sirens in front, fear behind. At the ER, they whisked him into surgery. 28 fractures, a punctured lung, a skull fracture. We waited in the ICU hallway, the kind built for pacing, not peace. Hours passed like molasses. Nurses came and went, machines beeped. I couldn't sit, couldn't breathe. Erica clutched my hand, whispering his name over and over like it would hold him together. I kept seeing his body fall, playing on loop in my mind. Then the detective arrived. He didn't waste time. They weren't real, he said. Not even close. They thought they could intimidate a child, thought we wouldn't fight back. They underestimated a boy who loved dinosaurs and the parents who loved him more than anything. As I sat in that waiting room, Jesse's blood still dried into my shirt. I made a vow, not just to my son, but to every family that lives under the shadow of pretend authority. You picked the wrong child. You picked the wrong family. The door opened with a soft creak. In walked Detective Ramos, mid-50s, calm eyes, tie slightly crooked, and a voice so steady it felt like someone finally turned the world's volume down. "Mr. Langford," he said. I nodded, barely lifting my head. "I need to ask a few questions, and I need you to hear me out." He didn't dance around it. "The two men arrested aren't with the HOA. They're not police. They're not even licensed private security." My wife gripped the edge of her seat. Ramos continued, flipping through a folder of documents. "Their names are Jordan McCaffrey and Levi Denning, both discharged from the military, one for insubordination, the other for conduct violations. They've been impersonating HOA compliance officers, running an enforcement scam across multiple neighborhoods." He laid out their con: fake citations, bogus rules, manufactured fines. "They prey on fear," Ramos said. "They don't come with warnings, they come with vests, fake clipboards, and manufactured authority." My jaw clenched. "They hurt Jesse for chalk." He nodded solemnly. "They've done worse. You're the first to fight back and catch it all on tape." Ramos opened his laptop and showed us footage from other neighborhoods. Grainy doorbell cams, shaky cell phone videos, all with the same playbook. Two men in tactical vests, citing community code violations and demanding immediate compliance. Some homeowners paid on the spot, afraid of fines. Others were bullied, shouted down, and told they'd be reported. "They monetized fear and sold it as regulation," Ramos said, his voice cold. It was brilliant in a sick way. These guys knew that HOA communities were fertile ground for power games. Most residents had already learned to obey ridiculous rules about lawn color and mailbox height. Throw a fake badge on it, and suddenly the average person doesn't question. They comply. Ramos continued, "We found documents in their vehicle, printed citations, spreadsheets with names and amounts collected, over $40,000 0 cents across 3 states. 3 states? I asked, stunned. He nodded. Fresno, Reno, here. They moved fast, didn't stay too long in one place. We think they were expanding. Until Jesse. Until a kid with a chalk dinosaur mural made the whole house of cards collapse. I looked at Ramos and said, "This wasn't about sidewalk chalk." He shook his head. "No, this was about power, and they picked the wrong sidewalk." The nurse gently tapped the door frame. "Mr. and Mrs. Langford." "Jesse's awake." We rushed in, hearts pounding, machines beeped and wires snaked across his small frame. His face was bruised, his body wrapped in casts and gauze, but his eyes were open. I leaned in, brushing hair from his forehead. "Hey, champ, it's Dad. You're okay, we're here." His lips moved slowly, voice a whisper. "Was it the T-Rex? He protected me, didn't he?" Erica burst into tears. I nodded, smiling through mine. "He sure did, buddy. But you're braver than any dinosaur." He smiled, crooked, weak, but real. Later that night, when Jesse slept again, I stepped outside the room and broke. My legs gave out. I slumped against the hallway wall and sobbed. Not just for Jesse, but for every moment I'd taken peace for granted. For every second that sidewalk had been sacred ground for my son's imagination, and had become a battlefield. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a witness, and soon I'd be a weapon. These men weren't going to get away with this. Not with a fine, not with probation. They were going to answer for every bruise, every fracture, every fear they planted across this country. By the next morning, our quiet little street looked like a crime drama set. News vans, reporters, microphones shoved toward our door. Jesse's story had exploded online. A neighbor's teen had posted the entire confrontation, the SUV rolling in, the fake citations, the assault, the takedown, 22 million views in 24 hours. The hashtag started trending, justice for Jesse, fake hoe fraud, sidewalk scam. People were furious. Veterans condemned the impersonators. Child advocacy groups demanded accountability. Even celebrities chimed in, posting messages of support and asking how this could happen in America's own backyard. Neighbors who had once waved politely now stood in clusters, outraged. Some admitted they'd received citations from those same men. A woman named Ruth down the block said she'd paid $150, 0 cents cash, for an unauthorized fence extension. Another man had been threatened with legal action for a garden gnome not aligned with architectural harmony. We weren't alone, and that's what made it worse. Because silence had allowed it to grow, ignorance had fertilized the scam. And Jesse? Jesse was the one who finally made the world stop and look, all because he wanted to draw a T-Rex in peace. The courthouse overflowed, news cameras, supporters, even strangers who had seen the video online. McCaffrey and Denning appeared in orange jumpsuits, heads bowed, arms shackled. It was the first time I'd seen them since that day. They didn't look confident anymore. They looked cold, small. The charges were read aloud. Assault with intent to maim, child endangerment, impersonating a law enforcement officer, fraud, conspiracy to commit extortion, no bail granted. Jesse couldn't attend the hearing, still recovering. But that didn't stop the community. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe a stranger, had drawn a massive chalk T-Rex on the courthouse steps. Bold, proud, roaring in defiance. When I saw it, my throat closed. That wasn't just a drawing, that was a message. Jesse wasn't just a victim, he was a spark. And these men weren't just criminals, they were a symptom of something bigger, something we were about to confront head on. How many fake uniforms are out there right now? How many people walk into our neighborhoods, clipboards in hand, fake IDs flashing, and we just let them? Would you know the difference? Would your child? This story isn't just about Jesse. It's about power disguised as policy, fear dressed up in khakis, and the quiet permission we give when we don't ask enough questions. So I'm asking you now, what would you do if it was your kid on the sidewalk? Stick with me, because this is far from over. 3 days after the arraignment, someone started drawing again. It wasn't Jesse. He was still recovering, but the chalk returned anyway. First it was a simple sun, then a dinosaur, then came words, sidewalks are for joy, real courage is colorful. A wave of neighbors joined in, kids, teens, even older residents who hadn't picked up chalk in years. Some knelt awkwardly on one knee, others leaned against canes, but every hand left color. Across the entire block, murals spread like wildfire, messages, names, tributes. One teenager scrawled across a whole driveway, one roar. Another depicted Jesse as a cartoon superhero holding chalk like a sword, and there it was. A community movement sparked by one small boy, one act of cruelty, and one giant wave of justice that refused to stop rolling. The Langford sidewalk became sacred ground. Teachers brought their classes, reporters arrived with microphones and left with tear-stained notes, but none of it compared to the image of Jesse's mural framed beneath his hospital window, rebuilt and brighter than ever. The message wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was visibility. The community wasn't going back to sleep. Then came the interview. Local news invited Jesse and his parents to speak. They almost said no. Jesse had barely regained his strength. But he insisted. If I talk, he said, maybe other kids won't be scared to draw. And so, in a quiet studio with a soft backdrop and dim lights, Jesse sat in his wheelchair, braces still on his arms, a bandage across his cheek, and told the country what happened. He didn't cry, he didn't pause. He said, I was just drawing dinosaurs. Then they said I was breaking rules. But my mom screamed louder, my dad ran faster, and now we're louder than them. The interviewer asked, what would you tell other kids who feel scared now? Jesse smiled. Pretend you're a T-Rex, big teeth, big heart, tiny arms, but still fight. The interview went viral within hours. It wasn't just the words, it was the defiant hope in his voice, the balance of innocence and unshakable strength, the image of a broken child telling a broken system, you can't keep me down. And then it happened. The dam broke. Other families began stepping forward. First one from Nevada, then Texas, then a woman in Georgia who recognized the exact same black SUV. All of them victims of the same scheme. Chalk had given them a voice, and Jesse had given them permission to use it. The Department of Justice didn't wait long. Within a week of the viral interview, they launched Project Dominion, a multi-state investigation into HOA impersonation and fraudulent authority operations. A task force was assembled. The goal: dismantle every fake enforcement outfit pretending to wield power in neighborhoods across the country. In 5 weeks, 11 arrests were made in 5 states. Men in faux uniforms, women issuing fake fines. Entire networks uncovered, each built on intimidation, each hiding behind vague bylaws and unverified authority. What had started as a tragic story was now the linchpin in a federal crackdown. And everywhere the agents went, they heard the same name, Jesse Langford. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a symbol of what it meant to stand up when kneeling felt safer, of what it meant to draw light when darkness demanded silence. In a DOJ press conference, a spokesperson said, "This child's bravery not only exposed predators masquerading as protectors, but forced this country to confront how easily a fake badge can override common sense. Thanks to Jesse, that ends now." The real badge holders, the ones who earned it, stood behind her in full uniform, and when asked what inspired this momentum, the spokesperson didn't hesitate. She pointed to the mural behind her, Jesse in chalk, arms out, surrounded by color. "That," she said, "that's what real power looks like." One night, after the press had quieted and the sidewalk was washed with rain, I sat outside with a cup of coffee. Jesse was asleep, Erica was reading. The world was finally quiet, but inside my head, the storm raged. Being a parent, I realized, is like standing between your child and the world, with nothing but hope and a spine. You don't get armor, you get instinct. And you pray, that's enough. I remembered Jesse's first steps, how he'd waddled like a penguin in 2 big socks. I remembered the first time he sketched a dinosaur on a napkin with a broken crayon. And now, here we were, the whole world watching his chalk, his voice, his scars. I wanted to believe the worst was behind us, but I knew better. We'd seen what a fake uniform could do, and worse, what silence could protect. But I also saw what color could reclaim, what a scream, a sprint, and a line of chalk could ignite. That night I made a quiet vow. I would never again assume peace was permanent. I would never again mistake a vest for virtue. And I would teach Jesse not just how to draw, but how to defend his canvas, with color, with courage, with truth. 2 months later, Jesse returned to school. He walked with braces, moved slower, but his spirit? That marched in like a parade. Kids surrounded him, some were quiet, others hugged him. One girl handed him a drawing of a rainbow-colored T-Rex with sunglasses. "He looks like you," she whispered. At recess, Jesse wheeled himself to the sidewalk near the basketball court. He pulled out a new pack of chalk, brand new, unopened, purple, green, yellow, red. Then he began to draw. A dinosaur, of course, but this time, it wasn't battling anything. It was flying. One by one, the kids joined him. Chalk passed from hand to hand, lines crossed into loops, names, stars, messages of hope. Teachers stopped, smiled. A janitor added a sun in orange chalk and said, "Welcome back, champ." Even the principal came outside to say, "We missed your art." And just like that, color returned to the pavement, and so did Jesse. They tried to act like this was just another courtroom, like this case was just another headline, but the moment the lights dimmed and the first piece of footage hit the courtroom monitor, everything changed. The video, grainy but undeniable, played in silence. A child kneeling on the sidewalk, smiling, click. The SUV door opened, thunk. The shove, then a crack, so visceral it echoed across the room like a thunderclap that shouldn't belong in a place this sacred. Gasps rippled through the benches. One juror covered her mouth. The judge closed her eyes. Detective Ramos took the stand with the kind of quiet intensity that made even the bailiff stand straighter. These men weren't enforcing rules, he said. They were hunting silence. They used HOA language as camouflage, clipboards and citations like currency. But their true power wasn't fake fines, it was fear. He paused, scanning the room, and they bet on one thing, that no one would speak up. But Jesse did. He pointed to the screen behind him, frozen on the image of Jesse lying motionless. And now they're going to learn what truth sounds like. The verdict didn't take long, but it didn't come easily either. The jury heard from pediatric surgeons, from HOA members, from security specialists who all confirmed the obvious. These men had no authority. They were grifters. Con men with uniforms bought online and fear sold door to door. Jesse couldn't testify with words, but he showed up, rolled into that courtroom in his chair, eyes unblinking, wrapped in casts and wires, but never looking away. The judge let him sit by the bench, a silent presence heavier than any gavel. Then his father stepped forward, voice trembling, not from nerves but restraint. My son was drawing dinosaurs. On a sidewalk we swept every week. He was doing what children are supposed to do: create, laugh, live. And then these men showed up and decided their pretend badge gave them the right to rewrite that moment into a nightmare. He leaned forward. But they didn't know Jesse. They didn't know us. They broke his bones, but they couldn't bend his spirit. Boom. The judge's gavel slammed. "Guilty," she declared, "on all counts." The courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. It exhaled. One collective, exhausted, relieved breath, like the world had been holding it since that first crunch of tires and scream for help. The men were remanded immediately. Shackles clinked, heads lowered, and the sound of Jesse's wheelchair turning quietly echoed over it all like a quiet victory drum. But that wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. Within 48 hours, a draft bill was introduced in the Senate, Jesse's Law, a nationwide call to arms. It proposed a simple principle: no one can enforce what they don't understand, and no child should ever be harmed in the name of fake authority. It would require all HOA security forces to undergo federal background checks, carry verified ID, wear body cams, and submit to local police authority. Any impersonation would become a federal crime. "No badge without background," the rallying cry declared. News outlets picked it up immediately. CNN, Fox, NPR. Jesse's story became a symbol not just of tragedy, but of transformation. Editorials rolled in. When Neighborhood Watch becomes predator, HOA tyranny must end. But the best headline came from a local newspaper: "The boy who roared louder than a gavel." At the next HOA meeting, if you could call it that, the room was packed. Not just neighbors, but press, city council members, state investigators. Karen, the acting HOA president, tried to open with the usual agenda, but no one listened. A father stood up, then a veteran, then a teacher. "We trusted you," they said, "and you handed our safety to monsters." A vote was called. A new board was elected. Karen stormed out, her legacy unraveling behind her like torn caution tape. The first order of business? Dissolve every past enforcement agreement. The second? Rename the neighborhood park to Jesse Langford Commons. A child who'd never asked for power now became its symbol. Not by force, but by truth. On the day of the vote, Jesse was there, rolling up in his chair, sketchbook in hand. He didn't speak. He just smiled as the crowd applauded. A single tear ran down his cheek, and no one pretended it wasn't real. The city went one step further. They funded a permanent mural on the sidewalk in front of Jesse's home. Artists from 3 states volunteered. They painted in shifts. At the center of the mural, a child in a wheelchair holding chalk in one hand and a shield in the other. Above him, a rising sun. Behind him, shadows in the shape of fear and lies, retreating into the concrete. Below it, carved in steel, "This is not just a sidewalk. This is where the truth stood still and refused to be erased." Later that summer, Jesse walked. No wheelchair, no braces, just Jesse, on legs that had been broken and rebuilt with steel, courage, and determination. The crowd that gathered to watch didn't cheer at first. They just watched in awe. Then someone clapped, then another. Then it became thunder. Jesse raised a piece of chalk over his head like a sword and wrote one word on the sidewalk beneath his feet. Here. He wasn't just alive, he was back. And the world had changed. They thought Jesse would fade into the background, that the news cycle would move on, the chalk would wash away, and he'd become a footnote in a larger narrative. They were wrong. It started with a simple idea, one Jesse whispered to his parents one night lying in bed with casts still hardening and dreams still stitched in pain. What if we help the next kid? And from that, Chalk Justice was born. Not a charity, a movement. It began with a single form online, legal aid for families facing HOA abuse, scare tactics, or impersonation fraud. Within days, dozens of emails poured in. They came to my door with fake fines. They said my flag was non-compliant. I thought I was crazy. Thank you for showing I wasn't alone. Jesse became the face, not because they needed a symbol, but because he insisted. If people see me, maybe they'll believe themselves. The site displayed a smiling photo of him holding a piece of blue chalk like a sword. The caption read, "Draw truth, erase fear." It resonated. News didn't stop either, not when Jesse met lawmakers in D.C. and handed them copies of his crayon-colored story. Not when he rolled into the Capitol in a Navy suit and said to the Senate Subcommittee on Civil Protections, "I'm small, but my scream was loud. If someone had believed me sooner, I wouldn't have so many scars." The room was silent, not out of pity, out of respect. Reporters called it one of the most powerful testimonies of the decade. Headlines the next day read, "The Kid Who Legislated with Crayons." Bills moved. State legislatures began adding HOA fraud units. Local police departments created hotlines. Chalk Justice released a free PDF titled "Spot the Faker," with tips like, "No badge, no authority. No clipboard, ask for credentials. Real officers don't fine with Venmo." The guide spread through online parenting groups like wildfire. Jesse's face was everywhere, but he stayed grounded. He still walked his street, still drew on sidewalks, still smiled like nothing had ever tried to take him down. And in that tidal wave of impact, his father, who once stood speechless in a hospital hallway, finally found the words he'd been trying to say since the chalk first hit the concrete. He wrote a letter. To the world. A letter that would be read aloud on a live stream, shared millions of times, and printed in newspapers across the country. He stood at the same podium where Jesse had once said, "Pretend you're a T-Rex." This time it was his voice that trembled, not from fear, but from pride. "You broke his bones," he said, "but not his roar. You took his balance, but not his bravery. You thought a fake vest and a fake title would silence a child, but you gave him something else. A voice no one can ignore." He paused. The audience held their breath. Jesse is not just a survivor. He is the reminder that we all have chalk in our hands. We either draw lines to protect or lines to divide. My son drew a dinosaur. You drew blood. But guess whose image remains? The crowd rose to its feet. No applause, just respect. Tears in eyes, hands over hearts. It wasn't a performance. It was closure. Then came the moment Jesse hadn't expected. The mayor declared a new city holiday, T-Rex Day, to honor courage, not perfection, not power, but raw, unfiltered courage. Every year on the anniversary of the incident, schools gave out chalk to every student. Parks opened for murals. Streets closed for block parties. Dinosaurs of every color roared from every driveway. One house had a balloon T-Rex taller than the roof. Another had a chalk mural of Jesse riding a T-Rex into a courtroom, holding a scroll labeled "Truth." Jesse stood beside the mayor at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The chief of police handed him a badge-shaped cookie and said, "You did more for this city in a wheelchair than some men do in a lifetime." Jesse blushed, then laughed. "Next year we add lasers to the T-Rex." The crowd exploded with laughter. And finally, in the quiet of that evening, with streets glowing in pastel chalk and neighbors still gathered on porches, Jesse's mom placed her hand on her son's shoulder and asked softly, "Do you feel strong?" He nodded, eyes twinkling. "I don't need to roar anymore. The world does it for me now." Okay? And that's where we leave this part of the story. Not with a gavel or a siren, but with a celebration, a reminder. Because fear wears a vest, but so does hope. So now we ask you, yes, you listening or watching, what would you do if this happened in your town? Would you recognize the faker? Would you stand between a badge and a child? Would you draw the line? Let us know in the comments, share this story, and if you believe that justice should never hide behind a fake title, like, comment, and subscribe, because we're not done telling stories like Jesse's, and every share makes sure the next kid drawing dinosaurs is safer than the last. The sun shone a little differently that day. It didn't blaze, it beamed, like it had been waiting for this moment, like it, too, needed closure. On the anniversary of the attack, the entire neighborhood gathered once more, not in grief but in celebration. The sidewalks, once marked with sirens and spilled fear, were now brimming with art again. This time on purpose, permanent, protected. Jesse stood in front of a brand new community mural, funded by donations, city grants, and a whole lot of love. On the wall, under the newly renamed sign for Langford Commons, stood a T-Rex, not snarling, not biting, but guarding a small boy with chalk in hand, and in the background, a smiling sun beamed down, drawn in Jesse's own style. As the crowd clapped, Jesse didn't say much. He didn't need to. He just pointed at the sun and said, "This time it's smiling because it knows we are too." Then he took his chalk and drew a line at the edge of the mural. One long, steady line. A boundary. A promise. His mother, Erica, finally spoke after a long silence. She held the mic gently, like it might carry her heartbeat. "The first time I screamed, it was because I thought I was losing my son. Now I scream for every mother who didn't get to grab their child in time. Jesse survived, but so many didn't. So I will scream as loud as I need to, for as long as I need to, until every fake vest, every fake threat, every silence pretending to be law is ripped off the streets for good." Detective Ramos was there too, standing quietly in the back. He wasn't there to be recognized, but someone handed him the mic anyway. "We learned a lot," he said simply. "Internally, we've changed our protocols, we've increased oversight, but more than that, we remember now. Jesse reminded us of our oath, that a badge isn't power, it's a promise, and we damn well better keep it." As the crowd thinned, Jesse's father stood near the mural, watching his son talk to younger kids, handing out chalk like it was candy. The air was lighter now, but the message never heavier. "People ask me," he said, looking toward the camera, "what would I do differently? And the answer is, I'd draw more. I'd pick up the chalk sooner. If a line drawn in color could stop evil, we'd need more chalk. We'd need every driveway filled with lines that say not here, not today." He looked down at his hands, then back at the kids drawing behind him. If you ever feel powerless, remember, Jesse fought with nothing but a scream and sidewalk chalk. And that was enough to stop an empire of lies. Jesse, he's taller now. The limp is barely noticeable, the casts are gone, but the fire remains. He still draws, every day, and now he teaches others too. On weekends, he leads small art circles where kids who've experienced trauma express it one chalk line at a time. When asked why he keeps going, he just shrugs and says, "Drawing makes me feel bigger than the bad stuff." Because that's what this story was always about, drawing courage when all you have is color, drawing boundaries where others erase them, and drawing hope into the cracks left behind by fear. So now, to you, the listener, the viewer, the person who just walked through this storm with us, if you believe that justice can start with chalk, if you believe that courage isn't about strength but about standing when you want to collapse, if you believe that some heroes don't wear capes, they carry chalk, then like, comment, and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs a reason to believe in people again, because Jesse drew a line and a nation followed it.